Okay.
Okay. So Jill, do you want to mute everyone just so we can get started? Okay. So is everyone happy that we start? Yeah.
Chairman, Councillor Hewitt is just trying to join us.
I can see he's up here, but
yeah, I can't. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's actually joined yet.
you've let me in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll kick off because we're already 4 minutes late, aren't we? No, it's only 4 minutes, but okay. So welcome everybody to this extraordinary full council meeting. This meeting has been called to discuss the planning application for the Lakes Estate. Okay, I think it's just important to point out that the Town Council isn't the planning authority. That is Milton Keynes Council. We are just a party that they do a consultation with. Members of the public are able to comment on the application of our Milton Keynes Council, as they will be the decision makers in this. And obviously all comments do need to be a planning issue, what's the word I'm looking for, Delia?
Connected to material considerations in the sense of the planning legislation.
Yes, thank you. So just a reminder to everyone, and the meeting tonight is to review this planning application and for the Town Council therefore to put forward to Milton Keynes Council their decision on any concerns they have, whether they agree, but again these must be on planning grounds. So just so we're all aware of what this meeting is regarding, we are not the decision makers. Okay.
Councillor Kennedy, if I can just draw attention to the fact that one of the members of the public who's joined us in order to make representations is indicating that she wishes to speak. Obviously, yes. It's not that moment. I'll just unmute.
Okay. Hi, Paulette. Is there an issue?
No, it was just really to be able to be clear that I'm a member of the public.
Yeah.
So that's all it was. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So on this meeting tonight, we do have members of the public who have shown an interest that they wish to speak at our meeting. So they have joined us on this Zoom call today. Okay, the other representatives on the call today are from Milton Keynes Council. Okay, so we'll first start on the agenda, which is the members' apologies.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies tonight from Councillors Brown, Hyde and O'Rourke.
Thank you. Okay, to note any members' declarations of interest on the agenda this evening?
I think it might just be worth reminding Councillor Rohim that he probably has an interest to declare. I don't think it's come up before, but because of his address.
Okay, Councillor Rohim, are you aware of anything you'd like to highlight or feel that you need to highlight?
Looks like we might have lost him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll carry on and then he can put that down later if he so indicates. So I've got nobody else declaring an interest. So we will move on. We're now moving to item 3, which is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Okay, run down. So we've got page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, I've got no indication of anyone raising anything, so we'll be signing those as a correct record of that meeting. Okay. Struggling here. Okay, so the next item, we will move over to a presentation on the application from Milton Keynes Council.
Chairman, I'm not sure which of the representatives of Milton Keynes Council wants to start the presentation, and whether they would like to take control of the screen or if they'd like us to share the presentation for them. So,
okay, I'm quite happy if you unmute them both so they can speak and decide how they wish to proceed. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you can share the presentation on the screen, that would be great, and I can just really talk through it for a few minutes. So what I just want to say is that obviously the planning application is available on the council website, and you know, all the plans there and all the details of the application are there. So I wasn't you know, prepared. I wasn't planning really rather to talk today too much about the application itself, but more about where we are in terms of a progress update, right? But obviously, if there are any specific questions that you know, we can answer either on the call now or following the call, then you know, we're very happy to do that. So if that's okay, then I'll just kind of kick off really with a little update. So just to introduce myself, so I'm Raoul Mundray, and I've also got my colleague Martin Stanners on the line. So we're part of the Milton Keynes Regeneration Development Team, and we've been working on the project. I've actually joined about 5-6 months ago, so I'm relatively new. But Martin's been working on the project for quite some time, so he probably can answer some of the more detailed questions better than I can. So that was really just the intro. So can we move to the slide 2? Okay, so just a quick project status in terms of the current position. So as people would be aware, the planning application was submitted in mid-March for 589 dwellings in the end, and the associated infrastructure. And it took, because obviously it was a very large application, it did take the planners quite a long time to go through it and validate it. This was actually achieved on the 3rd of June. And the application is split into 2 parts. Phase A, which is the detailed application, which is for the satellite sites, and Phase B, which is an outline application for the Serpentine Court and the work that's going to happen on that later on. So what that does mean is that once we've got approvals for both Phase A and Phase B, we would have to go back to get reserve matters approved for Phase B, and we would expect to do that sometime in 2022. So next slide, please. So in terms of current activities, again, due to the large size of the project, procurement regulations are very strict, and we have to follow the OJEU, the European regulations. And what we're doing is kicking off that process to find a contractor. And one of the things we're doing is we're looking at kind of minimizing risk, and particularly the risk of not being able to identify suitable contractors. So what we've done is we've broken the project into a number of lots or phases, if you like. So the idea being that you could get one large contractor who could bid for all of the lots, but also maybe one small contractor who could just bid for 1 or 2. So that just gives us more flexibility, and also means that we can phase it in different ways, and that just gives us more options and flexibility really. So, but one of the key things that we're working on at the moment is the project program and the phasing, and particularly detailing all the multiple activities that are required, and particularly thinking about what needs to happen when, to make sure that everything fits together. And obviously it's a very complex project, and that is a very complex process. So we're doing that in a lot of detail at the moment, but that obviously could change once contractors come in and they may have their own ideas as how phasing can happen. In terms of, obviously, it's an uncertain environment now, but currently with the virus. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to stick to, as far as possible, to our original plan and business as usual. Although, you know, you never know what impacts could come along because of that. The construction will probably follow the planning application, with phase A, you know, being you know, the first part, and then following on with, once the reserve matters are cleared up, on phase B, and then taking that forward. We move to the next slide, please. So in terms of moving forward, and as I said, obviously because of COVID, we're uncertain about the timescales. But what we are still seeking to achieve is a start on site in spring 2021, and start on site for B, for phase B, in early 23, and completion of the whole project 24-25. And that really will depend on what contractors we're able to identify, and, you know, what they say in terms of procurement materials and all those kind of challenges that, you know, that are kind of different now than they would have been a couple of years ago. But one of the key things that we need to do is there are a series of approvals that we need from various internal Milton Keynes committees, and in order to move forward with the project. And the key one of that is to get a cabinet approval. So what we're aiming for is to, currently we're working on our budget costings, as I said, working on the procurement approach, and we're hoping to be in a position to get you know, to basically obtain approval from cabinet in September. I know that some messages are coming on the screen saying that people can't see the presentation. I'm not sure if something can be done.
That's it. It's back now. It's back now. It did disappear, but it is back now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. So one of the things we want to do, once cabinet approved, hopefully in September, and we've got the budget costings, and obviously we'll also have, fingers crossed, planning permission. One of the things we'd like to do is to have a suppliers day, and that is to invite, you know, we've actually already put an expression of interest out to the market, and we to seek interest from suppliers, and what we're thinking of doing is putting up a marquee, or in some way, basically, you know, doing something at the lakes itself, so that you know, suppliers can come along and, you know, see the estate, and we can give them a little bit of a talk on, you know, what our objectives and plans are, and basically get them a bit excited and fired up on the project, right? So that's something we can't really do that until we've got, obviously we know it's going ahead, and so cabinet approval and planning permission are obviously the key prerequisites for that. So moving on to the next slide. So one of the things is that the planning application includes some environmental works, in fact a range of them, but there's some specific ones. So improvements to communal courts, new play areas, new play equipment, and also extensions to the Redway. So those specific works, what we're trying to do, we're looking at whether we can actually bring them out of the main contract. So we would have to wait until, again, we've got cabinet approval and planning permission. But what we could potentially do is we're actually already talking to our urban design and landscaping team internally as to whether, you know, they can actually do that using our own internal or already appointed Milton Keynes contractors. So what that means is that they could potentially start very soon after, you know, September. So the idea is to actually just bring them forward. People have been waiting a long time. We understand that since the actual ballot happened. So that would actually see something happen quickly on site, and some nice improvements that hopefully people see as a benefit. So, you know, we'll obviously let people know more about what's happening on that as we go along. So that's really the end of the presentation. I have actually just included an appendix with some other just information on the scope. that's pretty much it in terms of the actual presentation. So I know also that there were some questions that had been asked, so I'm happy to run through those. But Delia and maybe you could maybe advise on how you best want to cover those. But hopefully that's given people a bit of a snapshot, and I'm happy to, well, rather myself and Martin are happy to take any questions.
Okay, that's lovely. Martin, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think obviously the most pivotal time is September, when we expect the planning application to be considered and for full cabinet to approve the funding. At the moment, the cost of the whole scheme is about 130 million investment into the lakes, of which the first phase is about 85 million. So we need that sort of cabinet approval. It's probably the largest investment decision that they're going to be making for quite a number of years. So hence why it's September is when we want to take it forward.
Okay, that's lovely, thank you. And is there anything you wanted to add? Oh, she's on mute.
I've tried to.
Sorry, Anne, you're there now.
Yes, that's fine. No, that's everything. Thank you. That's fine.
Okay, so you haven't got anything to add. That's lovely.
No.
So the next part of the agenda is councillors' questions. So is there any questions that you'd like to raise regarding
Chairman, just before you start on councillors' questions, I see that Councillor Rohim has got his hand up, and I'm just not sure if he can hear us still, or if he's connected.
Yeah, I can hear you there, Lilia.
You
Thanks
can,
for
all
that.
right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, just wanted to check. That's okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rohim, we was wondering earlier on if you were declaring an interest in this item.
No, nothing, no.
There's nothing.
No
Okay.
interest, no.
No interest at all.
No.
Okay. So we'll move on then to councillors' questions. Obviously, this is on planning item only. So has anybody got anything they would like to say? Keith, Councillor Ely. Keith, we can't hear you.
I think he needs to unmute himself.
Sorry, I didn't take myself off mute. Good evening, all. I don't know how detailed we can be. I read quite a bit of the application. And, I've got a couple of queries in my mind that I'd like to clear up, if I may. On some of the drawings, it shows that there is a sort of balancing lake in Warren Park. On other drawings, it shows that there isn't. Can it be cleared up? Is there a lake there or not?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Basically, it's a balancing pond, and basically the lake will fill up if it rains heavily, but there will be some water in there, weeds, etc. So it may dry out in the extreme drought scenarios, but it will be relatively full most of the time.
Thank you.
It's basically the attenuation for the whole of Surface Land Court. It feeds through to the lake through a number of pipes under the park.
The second one is that I noticed that the car parking provision is very low on phase B, and it was in fact it's less than one parking space per dwelling. Is that really reasonable in the context of Milton Keynes?
One of the apartment blocks in the phase B, it will be an extra care facility where we don't need as much parking as one-for-one, but it is lower. It is lower than the average in phase B. You're quite correct in saying that, but it's mostly mitigated by the fact that the extra care block, which I think is block 5, it doesn't need as many cars because of the facility there. We have tried to put as much car parking around Phase B as possible, but you're right, it doesn't reach exactly 1 for 1. Bearing in mind that there's that extra care facility there.
Okay, I've only got another couple of questions, honestly. And I know that there's a reserve matter. You've got sort of 4-story development, which is the basic, the fundamental provision. But I noticed that there's a reserve matter of up to 6 stories. What's the reason behind
that? On Phase B.
Sorry?
On the Phase B, where current Serpentine Court is at the moment.
Yes.
We can go up to 6 stories. It depends on reserve matter. We don't know yet. It depends on parking. It depends on the numbers or appetite of us to build that Phase B out to the maximum. Maximum it is 6 stories, but minimum 4 stories. Planners have looked at the outline of the buildings from various markers around Milton Keynes, notably is it Little Brickell, across the park, Waterville Park, Newtonese. So it actually doesn't affect the skyline as much as it does at the moment, because at the moment the current building at Serpentine Court is 5.5 stories. So with the lift shaft it's 6 stories. So we're not going any higher than that. Okay,
and one other, if I may, is that you've got courtyard development on some of the again high rise, or not high rise, on the 4, possibly 6-story buildings. Are you, some of the photographs that you've taken with the existing development shows particular problems with the collection of rubbish and the storage of rubbish. With a courtyard, are you concerned in any way that that is going to not be improved at the best and could be substantially worse as it's because it's almost out of sight?
It's envisaged that most of the apartments in Phase B will be for sale. They won't be rented as council homes. So we do have integrated bin stores within each of those courtyards. There's 4 bin stores in each corner, and the idea is that people take their rubbish down as they leave. But I will take that point on board about the rubbish. You're thinking about rubbish being thrown over the balconies.
Well, currently that's what happens, yeah. It's been going on a long time, of course. This is nothing new, but with that style of development and with the refuse collection system that is proposed, which is the bulk storage in communal areas, historically, that's been a disaster within Milton Keynes on any of the flat developments. Even the 3-story developments that's occurred in West Bletchley has been a substantial problem. And I don't think that at the moment it seems to be a problem that's being solved. But thank you very much for those comments, and that's me finished, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ely. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Hume?
Yeah, I mean, I'm off mute. Okay, so my question is just regarding the impact on the surrounding area. So a lot of talk and consultation has happened on the Lakes Estate, which is really important. We've seen some, on the whole, it's been for a plan and development of this size is a good consultation. Not all, it could be better in some areas, but it's been good on the whole, in my opinion. I think it's just the impact on the surrounding area. So, for example, on traffic, in terms of the impact on the surrounding roads, particularly the roundabout at the end of Waterton Road. There's a lot of properties being added into this area, and that is one of my concerns, and also making good foot access, cycle access around the town generally. And I think some of that's, I've not necessarily seen that because we've been very focused on the actual estate itself, and just thinking about some of those connections. So I don't know, whether you've got any responses to how those impacts will be managed.
Well, with the Redway, we are building an additional. I think it's over 100 meters of additional Redway out with the estate towards the Bletchley train station. The idea through the existing Redway, we're going to extend it through the industrial park on the other side of Drayton Road. We were intending to have a sort of a cycle route through the park, through the nature reserve, but it's considered unsafe and just too expensive to do, so we have to light it, etc. We are going to do an improved Redway from the bridge, the train bridge on, is it Drayton Road at the top, the north end. The Redway will continue all the way through the estate, over into Waterville Park, and there meet the new Redway provision in the new estate, Barrett's estate. But also we'll have this link under the bridge and through to the industrial park to Bletchley Town train station and there. So we are enhancing the Redway throughout the estate, because at the moment there is a Redway which actually stops by the road, by the school, Fern Grove. And we intend to sort of like make that Redway join up with the rest of the Redways, because at the moment they don't. We obviously have been asked to do that, and we've accepted to do that. As regards the traffic, we have done modelling. We have asked Milton Keynes for the model, and we've modelled the number of homes and the increased traffic that would generate, and it doesn't generate any more traffic than the roads can cope with. And what we intend to do is slow the perimeter roads down Stoke Road and Drayton Road by introducing two crossings and elevated platforms to stop the speeding which occurs at the moment around the perimeter road. So we're enhancing the perimeter roads a lot, and to allow people to cross the road into the park, across the road into the Blue Lagoon Park by having those raised platforms. One, to slow the traffic down, but also to allow permeability, that people walk around. At the moment, it's a perimeter around the estate, and it's sort of like a barrier.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hugh?
Yeah, I think it does. I think just in terms of increase of traffic, it's said that the roads can take the amount of traffic that this is expected to take. That's still an increase in potentially on the traffic that is there currently. There is a pinch point at the moment, in terms of pedestrian crossing, which is the roundabout on the end of Water-Eaton Road. And with maybe some increased levels of traffic, it's already dangerous crossing for the surrounding community, especially with access to the local schools in that area. So that's a particular concern I've got. I suspect it's a concern on the back of the Eton Leeds development and other developments around. But yeah, that may need to have a look at.
Is that around the school times? Is that when the?
Well, I think it's all day. It's quite dangerous across there. Even, I mean, I've walked down there plenty of times, and in the middle of the day, it's difficult to cross. Say you can cross safely, but it's not the best crossing in the world. But it is on the key route to the Premier Academy and other schools in the area.
Okay. One thing I would mention is that we are removing all the current bus stops and improving the bus stops to have a shelter, and with the Doctrix timing system. So we've had those discussions with the bus company. The idea is that people can literally dial in and find out when their bus arrives, instead of having to wait in the open air and be exposed to the elements, which they currently do. So I think there's 9 of those stops going in around the estate. So that hopefully, from a public transport point of view, it should be beneficial.
Just to follow on from Councillor Hugh's question, that particular road, the Stoke Road and that roundabout, was actually raised in the Bletchley Transport Strategy, which was adopted by Milton Keynes Council. That was one of the roads highlighted, quite rightly by Councillor Hume there, as being too high volume of traffic. And you're just going to increase on that. So I don't understand your comment to say that you didn't feel it would increase, because it's already exhausted.
We've done the modelling, we've done the traffic modelling.
Okay, how can that be different from the Bletchley Transport Strategy, where it was said that it wasn't capable of taking any more traffic?
I think a lot of the projections are a lot of the traffic will go out onto the perimeter ring road rather than go into town. I think that's where the modelling is, but I will come back on that, because I'm not 100% sure. But I believe that was the gist of the modelling, is that they consider a lot of the traffic will go out onto the perimeter road around Milton Keynes rather than go into through Walton Eaton roundabouts. But I will double check on that. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Councillor Hume, is there another question you had before we move on? Is there anything else you wanted to raise? You've gone on to mute, sorry.
I think that's it. I think I'm a bit surprised at that modelling outcome. Surely we should be expecting people to be more connected with the local town centre rather than 5 miles down the road in Milton Keynes city centre. So I'm a bit surprised at some of that modelling outcome, but I'm not sure what the inputs were to it. So I can't, it depends what the inputs are to that model and what the outputs are. So
I think the modelling is included in the application as part of the transport assessment. So all the modelling data was put in there, but I will double check. I will double check, make sure it's there.
Okay, thank you. So any further questions, Councillor Hume?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly-Wilson?
Hi there. First, I've got a couple of questions. The first question really is around the far south of the site. So that would be the area around Lamon Drive. And I, during lockdown, have regularly been using Waterhall Park. And I think it is actually very difficult for people to walk down that road, and it's not very interlinked with the recreational facilities which surround the estate. Is there going to be any work to bring that up to standard? I know walking from Newton Lees, you have to walk down a grass verge, then cross onto the other side of the road, and then cross back. And I wonder if people have disabilities or any other issue, how difficult it is for them to do the same.
Obviously, with Newton, for people walking from Lakes to Newton Lees, it is difficult because purely because of the current infrastructure, the bridge being so narrow. There's nothing we can get around that. Walking onto Waterhall Park, there is a lot of new pathways through Warren Park, which are going to be lit with the raised platform on Stoke Road to cross into and link into Waterhall Park. So that route will be a lot more pleasurable and safe.
If you live in Diddington Close, though, or any of those areas on the far side, so I think Meltfort is one of them. I can't remember all of them, but it's not a great route for them to walk the road.
You're right. There is no perimeter path along that perimeter road. You have to walk into the estate, and that's not going to change. The idea is that we encourage people to walk into the estate rather than walk along the perimeter. I think mainly because that road is quite fast. That the application doesn't offer a footpath along the perimeter road. The encouragement is to walk through the estate, through the lit footpath, through the diagonals, through the estate rather than on the perimeter. Mainly because that's how people are. I'm very surprised that you have used that perimeter road, because I think most people do go through the diagonals through the park, and they're on after. It's a point. So I don't know how well used that perimeter path would be used, though. I'll make a point.
Just to come back on your point, I think that a lot of people, regardless of how it's designed to walk, they follow the route that is the quickest and the easiest for them. And so if you're living on that on any of the closes that come off of Lomond Drive, I think they're not going to walk through the estate. They're going to walk down that road. But thank you for your. The other issue the other item that I really wanted to discuss was actually about the community hub and also the shops. And I have a real interest. I believe that the shops and some of the community facilities are the heart of the community in within the lakes. And I'm really interested in the timescale that these will be developed in, and whether at any point the local community will be without these facilities, because I know that they are really wanted and needed by the people who live there.
Phase A, we've got 2 retail units, which is the pharmacy and the chicken shop. Those are the only viable businesses on the estate as we speak. The rest are in various forms of insolvency or bankruptcy. We've tried our utmost to keep the bakers on the estate, but they, as you know, they closed their shop shortly before lockdown. We have a lot of provision in Phase B for a supermarket and a grocery store and such like, but when we've gone to the market to look for retailers who want to use the Lakes estate, they're asking us basically, until the plan application's been approved, they're really not interested. We've shown them the plan, we've tried our best, but I think at the moment, because the market is so fragile, retail market, it's something which is difficult. It was really hard trying to keep businesses which we've got. So we've only got 2 businesses transferring, and they will transfer before they close.
So what about shops? So I think there is a supermarket there and also another grocery store that is open today. I was over there during the lockdown, and I think they're still open.
Yeah, they're still open. They will be open until the demolition of Serpentine Court. They basically, we are supporting them at the moment to keep open, but they have filed for bankruptcy, the same as the large news agents. It's pretty fragile retail-wise on that estate. I think until we actually have a better offer for potential retailers to look at, it's going to be a difficult one.
My understanding, I appreciate the statements that you're making. I've been over to the Lakes estate a few times during lockdown, and I think if you live on the far south of the estate and or the southwest of the estate, then a lot of people do walk over to Newton Lees. And conversely, if you live on the far northeast, then you can get to Water Eaton. But I'm really worried that there's going to be some residents within that area that are going to struggle to do any shopping if they're going to be without shopping for a period of time. And so I just think we need to be really upfront to residents and let them know that if there's going to be a period between demolition and anything being re-provided, I think that I totally accept that any proposal is ultimately in the long term going to progress the estate. But I know how I've been in Newton Lees for 7 years, and I know people who moved into accommodation in Newton Lees who loved living here, but there was no shops here and they didn't drive. So I'm really worried about those people who live in the Lakes estate and Water Eaton that are also going to be faced with the same issue.
All I can say is that you're right. From the period from demolition of Serpentine Court to the provision of the new shops, which are sort of like we're aiming for, supermarkets, grocery stores, there will be that 18-month fallow period. And you're right, we're going to have to think about how we assist the estates in that shopping during that time. Like what I will say is that that Happy Shopper will be there until the demolition. We've got an agreement with the owner of the Happy Shopper for them to be there. We've come to that agreement with them. They're not going to leave prior to that, but there will be that period of 18 months or so where there will be no grocery shopping on the lakes. You're right.
If a deal's been done with them to stay until the demolition, could a deal be done to have some kind of temporary accommodation that they have some, elsewhere, even if it is in a temporary building?
That's what I'm thinking about. That's obviously this is a council-sponsored application, and we want to make sure that the people on the estate are catered for throughout this. It's going to be an upheaval. That has happened in the past, and that's something which we could look at. But I can't promise anything, but there's something we could look at.
I think it's a really important point, and the reason is that once people learn to shop elsewhere, they tend not to come back. And there was a retail study done on Asda in Newton Lees, and they actually found that they got more people from coming from the Lakes Estate to shop there than they did in Newton Lees. And what happened is simply people in Newton Lees learned to shop on the way home from work or go elsewhere. And so I'm really worried for this community that actually in those 18 months they will learn new habits, and actually what we want is stores that are going to be self-sufficient. So I think it's really important to review them.
Point taken. I'll take that on board.
Councillor Kelly-Wilson, could I just come back on something else you mentioned?
Yeah.
I don't think it's been covered, is the community space, because at the moment we've got Spotlight and the community space in the Warren. What will happen when Serpentine Court gets demolished? Where will that community space go, and will we have temporary community space? Well, what will happen? I think that's one of the questions you asked about the community space, wasn't it, Councillor Kelly-Wilson?
Definitely, that was my final point.
Basically, the provision of the community hub, we're calling it the community hub in phase A, will be completed before the demolition of Serpentine Court. So there will be no diminution of community space throughout the build period, because the community hub will be up and running before the demolition starts on Serpentine Court.
And there's the Lakes Community Centre, which will still be also available, and I believe there's also Sycamore Hall, which I understand is not too far and also available. So those are the two spaces will be available right the way through.
Sorry, Councillor Kelly-Wilson, do you have anything else?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else wish to speak or ask any questions? Councillor Kenworthy? We can't hear you, Councillor Kenworthy.
Need to unmute yourself, Councillor.
Have you unmuted yourself? Still can't hear you. How are we doing, Councillor Kenworthy? Has it come up? No, we still can't hear you. Shall I go to Councillor Rohim and come back, Councillor Kenworthy, just so you can sort out your sound? Councillor Rohim, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to ask, with regards to provision of post office we used to have in the Serpentine Court a couple of years ago, do we have any provision on that come back again? If there is, what are the time frame that we can have a post office back in there again?
Sorry, for the minutes, Chairman, I couldn't get that. Perhaps Councillor Rohim could repeat what he said. I couldn't hear it.
Okay, I said we used to have a post office in the Serpentine Court.
Post office.
Now I can see there's so many shops, letting retail being talked about. What are the provision for the post office to come back again? That is part of our daily life. elderly, everyone used to visit post office there. And we miss the support services very, very badly on that place. So my dear friends, if they can give us some information with regards to the provision of the post office, is there a plan on the project for them? Is there any detail on the available? What is the policy on that? Please, if they can give us some information on that, I'll be appreciated on that. Thank you.
So clearly, if from the council point of view, we're happy to support the provision of the commercial premises for a post office, but a post office is a private business, so it will depend on the right people coming forward. I'm not sure if there's anything more that we can do than kind of support other organisations or individuals who would like to come forward and start one.
Okay, thank you. Was that all you needed to ask, Councillor Rohim? Looks like it. I'm taking that as a yes. Councillor Kenworthy, have you got your sound?
Yes, I finally managed to do. Thank you, Chair, for recognising me. Obviously, the councillors have made lots of good points about traffic flow. I don't believe in those figures of the traffic flow at all, and some of those roads are incredibly difficult to cross. I'm worried also about the provision where we have with bus stops, around Melfort, Eppingham, Arrow, in the Lomond and down in the Stoke Road. Quite a few of those bus stops at the moment are only, you can get there by walking on grass only, which is very difficult for mobility. So I definitely want to see improvements in provision of people gaining access. There is very little lighting by the routes to the bus stop. They're often full completely of rubbish. There's a lot of fly tipping, very similar to what Councillor Ely has been saying. People do not like walking down the diagonals because they are often blocked. The signage is appalling as well, for people trying to cross that part of the lakes and down towards Stoke from Lomond. And Councillor Kelly Wilson came up with several good points about people's shopping habits of what's going on. So I am very concerned with about access, lighting, fly tipping, signage, the ability to get on and off buses by going over. Some areas are just tracks, mud.
Okay, that's
a lot of improvement in Lomond, please.
Councillor Kenworthy, okay, I think that's lovely. It's just that I was just wondering if there was an actual question, but you just expressed what has already been said. That's thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo and emphasise a lot of those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Obviously, this is about the planning application.
Yeah, right, yeah. When you said the first part of Serpentine Court is going to be done for section B, have you got provisions for the council tenants that already live there? Because they won't be able to go back there because they're going to be up for sale. So have you got provisions already, or are you going to leave that to the last minute?
The resettlement of Serpentine Court tenants will be to the outlying sites which will be built in Phase A. So the idea is that they only move once, and that is into their new home on the estate. Is that what you meant?
You'll have enough houses to cover them from
yes.
Serpentine Court to there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So does anybody have any questions? But it must be regarding the actual planning application.
Councillor Hewitt, Chairman.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. The question was regarding earlier on, we were talking about the bus services and talking about bus shelters, etc. going up there. You mentioned there was going to be 9 shelters going into the site. Is this 9 new additional shelters, or is this refurbishing and
replacement
the existing ones?
Replacement, yeah. They're replacing the current bus shelters with new ones.
So you're not going to add on any new? There's nothing new going in there.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I'm aware that the council's bus team that look after buses is actually doing some survey work currently, and so I'm sure that if they do identify the need for more buses, then that's something that that they would look at and talk to bus companies about. But that's an ongoing thing that's actually really not part of the application itself, but as part of the application, what Martin said.
That's right. Okay, so does anybody have any further questions that are related to the planning application? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. Okay, so I will now move on to questions from the public. Again, these are on the planning application, because I think we've strayed a little bit off course on the questions we're asking. This is about the planning.
Chairman, I don't know how you want to handle the next part of the meeting. Both the residents who've contacted us submitted questions in writing, which were sent to Milton Keynes Council before the meeting, and answers have been provided in writing. But because it was all quite late, I haven't been able to circulate them to everybody. The residents who asked the questions have got them. I don't know how you want to move forward with this part of the question, or if this part of the meeting, or if the residents who raised the original questions want to seek clarification of any of the answers they've had, or I'm in your hands as to how best you want to proceed. Okay.
I think for being clear and transparent, that the residents who've joined the call should be allowed to ask their questions, and the questions answers recorded in this meeting, and also that they can ask for clarity from if they don't understand the responses they've had.
Well, Councillor Kennedy, one option is I have got the questions here and the answers in front of me. So if you like, I could actually briefly talk through them, and then if there are any supplementary ones that they could be asked, afterwards, if that would help.
Okay. Jeanette and Paulette, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Yes.
Otherwise, it's probably going to be fairly long-winded going through the question and every answer.
Okay. Yeah, if you could go through those questions and answer, that'd be excellent.
Sure. So I won't read out the questions. I'll try and pick out some of the key bits of them, and then talk about the answers, and then as I said, if there are any supplementary ones, we can cover them at the end. Yes. Okay. Yes, so from Jeanette Marling, there was a similar question to one that was asked earlier. Provision for a post office and also a free of charge ATM, and I think we actually answered that question earlier, that the council would certainly offer commercial space, but actually provision of a post office and etc. is a private sector issue. But if an organisation comes forward who's willing and interested to do something like that, then we could see and look at other ways to support. Question 2. There's a concern on particularly on there's a road called Levin Close, and which is currently a cul-de-sac, which is actually going to become a throughway, and there was a question whether that would become a rat run. So the answer to that is well, we again, probably similar to an answer that was given earlier, is that we have Milton Keynes Transport and Highways Department have been consulted as part of the application process and have agreed that the layout of the development, and consider that the traffic would be adequately managed, and so we think that shouldn't be an issue. Question 3: how will residents be engaged in the building programme, especially in relation to the adjacent sites? Yeah, absolutely. We want to engage with the residents, particularly in regarding issues that be affecting them. So the kind of areas that we would be interested in looking at, or talking to residents, engaging with residents, such as site safety, the tidiness of the site, dust, noise, working hours. Somebody mentioned signage earlier, that kind of thing. So, and any issues that kind of residents feel affect them during the development process, then I absolutely will engage with them. And I know Anne's on the Zoom meeting as well, and so she's setting up a process for that engagement to happen. So that would be not covering that point. There's a concern about loss of play facilities, shopping facilities, community facilities, etc. as I mentioned in my short presentation, we are talking to the Milton Keynes Urban Design and Landscaping team to bring forward those environmental work, which hopefully we can start as soon as we do have planning permission and cabinet approval. There's also, as Martin was talking about, improvements to the Redway. And there's actually 7 or 8 play areas on the estate which if we can do as part of these environmental works would bring those right forward. So that would be really brilliant if we could manage to do that. And the other thing is that obviously Warren Park is going to be, major work is going to be done to that. I think there's a very large amount of money which is budgeted to be spent on that, and the idea is to provide a destination play area which includes a skate park and jogging trails and a whole range of different facilities and more planting and trees, etc. So that should be a a fantastic facility when it's finished. That is due to be completed before the end of phase A. So that will be available prior to any anything happening with Serpentine Court. Going on to the community centre, I think you mentioned that, as I said, the Lakes Community Centre and Sycamore Hall will be available, as a temporary thing. But and as Martin mentioned, the community hub will be available again in phase A. Will be completed in phase A before any work on phase B starts. Then. The bus service, what's happening with the bus service? Will anything be happening to that? So, and I think Martin's again mentioned that, certainly we would expect the bus service to carry on as normal. There may obviously be some temporary diversion as works are carrying on, but I'm sure that we can work again through the engagement process exactly what those diversions are, and to make sure that the information about that is clearly communicated to residents as well. So that was all the questions from Jeanette Marling. From Paula Ted, there was a question about parking within Bletchley, particularly around the High Street. Now, that's obviously a difficult question to answer, as Bletchley is outside the scope of our planning application. However, if we are able to generate more activity from the, especially when phase B commercial is developed, then hopefully people will want to use that commercial more, and there will be a decent, a commercial provision, which will mean that hopefully people won't feel the need to go to Bletchley so much. So that may at least help to mitigate that. But obviously, as I said, that's not in our scope of our planning application. So but that's the comment we can make on that. And there was also a question on the nature of the light industrial facility that's going to be provided. So light industrial premises is a planning classification, and so there's going to be just one unit available for that. And the idea is that unit should be able to be attractive to someone who wants to run like a small workshop. It could be, for example, for repairing vehicles or furniture repair or joinery, or it's basically small scale, low intensive type of uses. So that's really all the questions and all the answers. So please feel free to ask any questions or something.
Okay. I think that those answers are quite thorough, and I understand they have been sent out, so they are there. Is there any clarification that you wanted on those questions that you've asked, Jeanette? Can't hear you, Jeanette.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Is there any clarification you wanted on any of those answers?
Yes. There's quite a bit on the community and play facilities. There was I was hoping for a bit more. Where you talked about the community spaces. Perhaps I wasn't clear. I was you're talking about improving some courts, but no mention of the majority of the estate, which is streets where many more people live. There doesn't seem to be any plans for those, and there may be something in the plans, but not being able to access them because there's been no hard copy and many people have not been able to see them. not being able to pick out any information that might be there. Also about the play facilities, where are these extra play areas going to be, and how do you know what planning, what park equipment is required? For example, when Kayak improved at one of the abandoned play areas, he spent a lot of time and effort talking to the children, the parents, taking surveys, getting the children to do drawings, take them on site visits to see what equipment was wanted and needed. And so I'm just wondering what the plans are for the involvement to find out what exactly is required, but and also on the major concerns about the shops. Saying that Happy Shopper will be there till the end is not reassuring at all. Most people do not use Happy Shopper. And when, for example, the buses don't run because of the snow, people are reliant on just the shops in Serpentine, and to not have something that is really worrying for people. Just one final point about, it's not really social, but community, but I was wondering about the social housing. What is going to be the mix of type and size of property, and why is the social housing segregated from the private? They should ideally be indistinguishable from each other, so you create a mixed community. And
I think, Jeanette, you need to stick to the questions that you asked, and those type of questions you really should be putting to Milton Keynes Council with the planning application.
Well, I wasn't able to. As I said, I've not been able to access it.
Okay, well, maybe that we can give you some assistance. Okay, are you able to answer the further clarification questions that Jeanette has asked? Or do you...
Sure. Well, I think on the shops, I think we've already said, covered that quite in quite a lot of detail already. And but certainly, as I said, specifically on the play areas, there are actually 7 to 8 play areas that we're actually looking at that have proposals. So maybe we can actually share, kind of the actual plan which shows the play areas. But there's a specific document, if you're able to get hold of, which is called the Design and Access Statement. If you look at it online, or we can try and get you a copy of that section of it. But that actually gives a lot of detail exactly what will be done in terms of the play equipment and the player, which player is, and the location of the player is, and and the actual details of exactly what play equipment is going to be provided hasn't been decided yet. I mean, obviously it's just a budget, and then once we get more into detail, and particularly we have to decide whether our landscape team is going to be doing this work early once the cabinet approval, etc., and the planning permission is given. But so at that point we can flesh that out in more detail, and maybe also we can work with Anne as well to actually talk about exactly what type of play equipment would be required or would be beneficial. But as I said, there is a huge kind of plan to do a lot of work on these different 7 or 8 different sites. Plus, as I said, Warren Park hopefully is going to be an amazing facility as well at the end.
Okay, so Paulette, is there anything you wanted clarifying on your question?
No, the debate has sort of covered
everything.
Well, yeah.
Okay, well,
Chair,
Chair. Yeah.
What I suggest we do is email the Design and Access Statement regarding estate improvements, which includes all the play areas and the routes and the park to Jeanette. So if she hasn't got it, at least she can look at it and comment on it.
That would be absolutely lovely if you could do that.
It's too big a document.
Okay. let's liaise with Anne and see what we can get to you, Jeanette.
We can certainly get the extract of the bit that covers the play areas and forward that
it's
to you.
pages long. So what we'll do is we'll print it off and pop it round to Jeanette. Okay.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. There's just one question. What are you going to do if you can't sell the shops, get people into the shops? What's your backup plan if that doesn't happen?
Well, the intention is to start marketing the shops when that plan applications is granted in phase B. There are some indicators that some small supermarkets are interested, like Co-op, but at this moment we really don't know, because COVID as such.
Oh.
Martin, you've gone on to mute. If you
don't know how that's happened.
Oh.
So the backup plan was obviously to convert them to some form of residential if there is no takers, or to look at other uses like office use or cafes. We'll have to look at that if we can't let them as retail. But we're really in the realms of the market and how COVID affects the market.
But those units won't be ready for let for some considerable time. So let's fingers crossed hope that the market improves and you know, the COVID situation ends and you know, we're able to be in a much better position to attract you know, good tenants into those.
Okay, we are in the public speaking time, but I know that Councillor Hume wanted to quickly come back in before we move on.
So there's 2 points. There's a question about places, but there's also a question on the Facebook feed, which I think might be useful to just ask the officers while they're here, especially if that member of the public may be listening. That question was, what's happening about the parking around the estate and garage areas? So I think that's in the existing areas, and seeing if there's any improvements there. But my question was really about the process and just around, we're currently in the situation where people aren't getting out as much as they are. Consultation is harder to do at the moment because people are at home, they're shielding. Those who have difficulty with accessing online, how are we consulting them through this planning process? Are some documents being able to be printed and shared with them? And for example, the design access statement, can that be printed and shared with Jeanette? Maybe that might be more useful for her than having it over email. But I'm just really aware that there's some people who won't be engaging with this process because they're stuck inside, basically. And in the next stages, how do we expect to reach out to them as we start to work out what the impacts of the building work is going to be as well? And we may have a second peak, so they may well be stuck inside for another 3 months again. I hope not, but yeah, that might be a question more for Anne. I'm not sure.
Yes, I think Anne, maybe were you able to address the consultation process? You're on mute at the moment.
Hello, Ed. At the moment, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Regarding consultation, and I mean, obviously, we'd all love to get back to how we were. So it's sort of week by week, things are starting to loosen a little bit. So I'm waiting to sort of receive instruction about whether we can actually do face-to-face appointments. A couple of things have been delivered to people in the community, like Jeanette's, you know, there'd be an arrangement for Jeanette. The same's happened on Fuller's Slade. There's no sort of council policy at the moment about how engagement will go forward. I mean, looking at the government directives at the moment, everything in the open air seems to be okay, or getting that way, doesn't it? They're sort of saying is so potentially if there's engagement regarding, for example, work to be done in the courtyards, engagement could take place there with a sort of a pop-up, and we've done this before. That's the way I've heard a couple of discussions about that. We could edge forward. As far as like massive consultations in Spotlight and things we've been doing, that's more tricky, but we just have to go along with the government sort of directive of it. But I hopefully we'll be able to sort of loosen it as well.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so I think we've had all the questions from councillors now, and no questions further from the public. So I think we'll move on to item 5, which is to review and comment on the planning application. So this is for what the town council's view is to go into Milton Keynes Council, who make the final decision on the application. Does any councillors wish to start the ball? Councillor Hume.
I can start the ball. I wasn't expecting to. I think we should.
I thought you indicated. I do apologise. You don't have to.
No, I know. I will do, but I'll also make a proposal, and then
Okay.
I can sum up the book debate at the end, which is always my favourite way of doing it. I think as council we should be supporting this application. I think it's there's been a number of people on the Lakes Estate who have been wanting change for many years, and we should be supporting that. It's been through a referendum, certainly with the residents of Serpentine Court. It's been through a referendum. They've quite clearly made the views heard that they want it to change. They want demolition. They want parts of the estate to be rebuilt. Extensive consultation has happened. The plans broadly follow the neighbourhood plan, which I think is a credit to the teams for broadly following that. And there might be some slight bits and pieces which are slightly different, but it meets it. I think that's a fantastic achievement, given that was a very good piece of consultation a number of years ago regarding the neighbourhood plan. So I think there's lots of positives about this. So I would propose that as a council we support it. But I would also want to see, and this is where I might take some amendments if people want to, around some of the concerns around the traffic modelling and some of the, which may well, I'm still thinking about how that could be material consideration, but I think we need to make those views heard in our comments to Milton Keynes Council Planning Department.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hume. Does anyone else wish to comment or put forward any amendments? Councillor Ely.
Sorry, Ed, a couple of amendments. I do agree with your general principle, and I'll go along with that. I would like two. One is I am concerned about the provision of parking. I think it is phenomenally low and doesn't even meet the current criteria for the Lakes Estate, which is certainly more than one per property. And there is an obvious lack of parking there. But secondly, if you were a private developer, you'd have to provide 106 money. Now, I presume Milton Keynes, being Milton Keynes, is exempt from that, so wouldn't have to do it.
Actually, that's point of order. We are paying a considerable amount of money in Section 106 contributions.
Ah,
really?
Yes.
Any idea how much?
It's still in draft, but it's several £million, particularly for education and secondary and primary education. It's in the millions. But as I said, it's still in draft. No final agreement has to be made. But that's what the draft discussion kind of level is.
Well, it does beg the question: was the town council consulted? Because we had ideas for monies for on the Lakes Estate as well. But that aside, what I was coming round to is that if it was a private developer, the private developer would be required to sign documents saying within the planning, would be required to sign documents to say when he was providing facilities within the public domain and facilities, and also at what stage and what. I would like to see something within our agreement to the planning for that to be a requirement of Milton Keynes Council too. I don't know if you'd accept.
That will be the case, because that's exactly what the Section 106 is, and we will be required to complete. It won't actually be called a Section 106 because obviously the council can't actually contract with itself. But there's normally what they call an undertaking, an agreement of an undertaking, an MOU, and that we will be required to complete that. And as I said, the monies will be paid, but the exact details of that is up to the planners to tell us what they want and for us to negotiate and then come to a final agreement. And then once that is put in place, then absolutely the buildings cannot be occupied unless we fulfill those obligations.
And that is a legal undertaking.
Absolutely. Well, by legal, it's because we can't contract with ourselves, it's not a contract, but it's an undertaking from one part of the council to the other. And this is the standard way councils all over the country operate. So, we will be committed to it.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to confirm that at this stage, there's been no consultation with the town council on any of those obligations, equivalent planning obligations thus far.
So that needs to happen.
It would be the planners who would be involved in that. Yeah. So we can't have control of it.
Surely I understand, but it is very difficult for the town council to review a planning application without all the information in front of it. And I appreciate these negotiations are very difficult, but my members are being asked to make a decision and make recommendations on this planning application or comment on it without a full set of information.
Well, then the two amendments I would make, Ed, is one on the question of the parking provision, and second, conditional on consultation with the town council on the undertaking, particularly in fact the view that we have a substantial interest in the spotlight and so on. Would you accept that, Ed?
Yeah, I would accept that. So the proposal is we support the development in principle, and for the reasons I outlined earlier, and with the following concerns and comments.
Okay, yeah, fine, thanks, Ed.
Can I also just make the point that the parking provision in total across the entire development, I know you earlier mentioned particularly Phase B, but across the entire development is greater than the 1-to-1. We've got 589 residential units. And it needs to be exactly worked out, but there's well over 600 spaces.
Okay. So I've got Councillor Kenworthy and then Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. The general thrust, I completely agree with. We need the housing, but in terms of mobility, traffic, could it be split, Councillor Hume, into the people who have vehicles and transport, that the traffic garaging and the parking ratio is not sufficient? Many of our residents have 2-3 vehicles, usually a small van, as well as multiple occupancies with multiple vehicles, so the parking ratio is wrong. But I'm heavily concerned with those who don't have vehicles, who with limited mobility, and the provision for gaining access to buses across grass, across mud, is just not being fully taken into account. So I'd like the traffic side to be split two ways: those who have and those who haven't, if you could take all that on board. And I thoroughly back this point that we can only go back with this lack of engagement needs to be clearly mentioned as part of it, because the social provision, the S106 money, is what's going to happen there. It must be stated as part of the motion that we are disadvantaged in the information, or some words to that effect, please. Thank you, Councillor Hume.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hume, I think most of the points that Councillor Kenworthy raised there were covered in Councillor Ely's amendment about parking.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's. I think that he raises an important point about access to public transport. And also around the S106 was in Keith's comments. So yeah, that's going to cover.
Okay, so then I've got Councillor MacDonald.
Can you hear us, Councillor MacDonald? He is unmuted at this end.
Yeah.
No, I've got it now.
Okay.
It didn't give me the prompt for some reason. Yeah, basically, I'd like to put in there as a second for the proposal with the amendments, obviously for parking, because also we want to bear in mind how popular, when it went to referendum, the actual neighbourhood plan was. I believe it was 84 or 86% in favour, even though it wasn't a huge turnout. I believe it's something along those lines.
It was
For the
quite a big
original.
turnout. It was a big turnout.
Yeah. Oh, it was quite, yeah.
And it was a 90% plus yes vote, I believe. I'm looking at Anne.
I know it was huge. Yeah. So from the original plan when we did that, so yeah, I would obviously second.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Kelly Wilson.
So thank you to all of the team who, because I remember the meeting that we had at the Town Council in the library, and I think quite a few points that we gave you have been picked up in this application, particularly around phasing of the facilities and around connectivity. So that's really pleasing. Just with regards to this memorandum of understanding, the S106 that the council has with itself, I would Newton Lees has a particularly bad section 106 with no timeframes for delivery of any of the items here, and it's been really bad for the residents here. And I would just want the assurance that this memorandum of understanding will contain very specific timelines and be linked to a certain amount of property, so we don't end up with everything being backloaded and the community suffering as a result.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kelly Wilson. Councillor Hume, do you want to run through what you believe your proposal is now?
I think Delia definitely wants me to do that.
Definitely.
So the proposal is that we support the plan and application in principle. There's a high level of want for change in the community, as shown by the referendum undertaken by Serpentine Court residents in 2018. Yeah. But however, we do have a number of concerns. S106 money, or the memorandum of understanding, however.
I think it's an undertaking, isn't it? It's what would make the application acceptable. It's some clarity about what would make the application acceptable in terms of an undertaking from the council for planning gain.
Yeah. So on that, more consultation with the town council, and also dates must be included in that of status of when that S106, and call it that for now, will be provided. The second concern is regarding the parking and the provision of parking. It's lower than what potentially we would expect from most applications. So that is a concern. Have I captured that right, Keith?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
And then there was a final point. There was a point. What was the other point? There was one from Councillor Kenworthy about access to public transport points to make sure that they are accessible to all.
Okay, I think that covered all.
Everyone's.
Was there anything about the traffic movement?
Yes, concerns around the traffic movement, especially on Stoke-on-Drayton Road and the pinch point that is the roundabout Waterreaton Road, and concerns about the method of traffic modelling.
Yeah. Does everybody agree that that is what we've discussed? Councillor MacDonald, are you happy to second that? Still with all those? Yeah. Okay then, so does anybody have any other comments? Before we go to the vote, I just want to remind Councillor Rohim if he wants to declare an interest. And the only reason is I'm thinking, and you can correct me, Councillor Rohim, if I'm wrong, but you're connected to Serpentine Court? So therefore, am I right, Delia, that would therefore be an interest?
I think as a resident of Serpentine and a tenant of Milton Keynes Council, which I believe is what's on the register of interest, it would be wise for Councillor Rohim not to vote on this occasion.
Councillor Rohim? Can we unmute Councillor Rohim? in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Hello, Councillor Rohim.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I'll abstain from that voting. Yeah, that's fine.
Vote. Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Rohim.
Yeah.
Okay, then. So it's a show of hands for councillors. All those in favour of the motion that's been put forward. Okay, I have that as everyone, but we'll just check. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining apart from Councillor Rohim? Okay, so that's the council's position that will go forward. I'd like to thank you all for your time. I do appreciate it, and thank you for the representatives from Milton Keynes Council for coming to our meeting. Again, that's greatly appreciated, and the time and patience in answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well that I believe is our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good evening. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Can get my dinner on now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I only just made this one.
Can we stop streaming on Facebook?
I'm just trying to do it now.
Wow.
The recording has stopped.
Yes, but
You
the
say what you
streaming
want now,
hasn't.
Richard.
Live.
The streaming hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah.
Careful.
I'm just having a bit of trouble with it.
We've had Ron Haynes on here twice all evening, Ron.
Oh,
You've
no,
been
one-
on it twice. all night.
And I can't get off it.
Once is too much, Ron.
Yeah,